Hello, listeners. It's Lisa Starr, and back with another episode of StarrCast. In the wellness world, we've been exploring the way that wellness has expanded beyond the rooms of traditional treatments and into new areas. And our guest today is an exemplary example, I should say, of that practice in the business he has created. So I'm happy and thrilled to welcome Dr. Jonathan Leary, the CEO and founder of Remedy Place, to StarrCast today. Welcome, Dr. Leary.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure. So Remedy Place, such a great name. And I'm remembering I was in Los Angeles in February of 2020. And whenever I'm traveling, I'm looking for wellness things, what's new. I'm doing Google searches, whatever. And I come across this Remedy Place and I go, what's that? I looked it up. It's a social wellness club. I said, what the heck is a social wellness club? This is fascinating. So I got in a taxi and went on over there and had a tour, and I was just blown away. Like, wow, this is so cool. Beautiful, interesting combination of services. Just the whole model. Thought this is really long before I had met you, of course. And then COVID came, and so I'm sure that was a bit of a wrinkle in your journey. But before we get into Remedy Place, let's go back to you, Dr. Leary, chiropractor. Went to
Yes.
school for chiropractic and you became a chiropractor in 2015 or so.
Yes.
Tell us what happened then. You just had a regular practice or did you envision something different from the start?
Yeah, I was always going the pre-med route, and I just thought I was going to be a traditional medical doctor because where I grew up in Rhode Island, that was all I was exposed to. But when you're doing, your pre-med studies, you have to shadow and volunteer, and build your resume. And I spent a lot of time in the hospital setting. And I was just like, I don't think this is actually what
Mm,
I signed up for. It wasn't a great work environment because it's a hospital settings or clinical settings. It's stressful for the patient, it's also stressful for the doctor. And I was like, I don't think this is the type of care that I wanted. And that's when I knew that I wanted to create my own type of practice. And that's when I started to work on Remedy Place. It was in 2012. I started my doctorate in chiropractic because they're both 4-year programs or 8 years of schooling that you can either condense down a little bit if you take off all this, if you work through the summers.
mm,
But I knew that if I didn't want to prescribe meds and I didn't want to perform surgery, I was like, oh, a chiropractor in the state of California can treat and diagnose anything. They just can't puncture the skin and they can't prescribe medication. So I was like, great, I'm going to go through school as a chiropractor. And throughout that whole doctorate, every Sunday I worked on the business plan for Remedy. And, I just was like, all right, I'm just going to create my own type of dream practice. And at first, it was just a beautiful space that had hospitality standards. That way, it was, enjoyable for the patient and the doctor. But when I graduated, I had this 158-page binder, and it was my business plan. I Googled how to do everything in business. I knew nothing.
of course.
And I went to the bank and I just thought you got a business loan if you had a good business plan. And they kind of laughed at me and they were like, sir, you have no
That's not how
money.
it works.
Yeah, they're like, you have no money and all this student loan debt. How am I supposed to give you a loan? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? That's why I need a loan. But then I pivoted and I opened up a concierge practice in sports medicine where, I did everything from chiropractic to functional medicine to Chinese medicine to physical therapy, but also I was using a lot of the modalities that we use in Remedy. And for 5 years, I got to just help people and I got to listen, really listen to the patients and see like what were they willing to, what were they not willing to do, common lifestyle habits, stressors, and really, most importantly, what worked and what didn't. And I got to work on the business plan for Remedy for 5 extra years to really fine tune it based on like firsthand experiences of basically creating a remedy for everything that I thought needed solving. And in 2019, we were able to open that first club.
So how did you get into TCM? That's not on the traditional training route for medical doctors in this country anyway.
Well, in chiropractic school, you end up learning a lot about functional medicine and Chinese medicine. And I didn't do acupuncture or cupping, or I did some Chinese herbs, but it was mostly just technique called gua sha, and gua sha, modern day gua sha is called Grafton. Now you'll see a lot of beauty um, products with gua sha. So it's a very different thing if you look at the history of gua sha, but it's an old Chinese medicine technique that helps break up old scar tissue and adhesions, and it was extremely powerful.
So you say, oh, we opened in 2019, like no big deal. But I mean, it had to be, there was a lot to that story. It's a massive building. You had never built anything before. You obviously someone helped you financially. I mean, what was that journey like?
Yeah, my patients became my investors to get the first lease without having a business or finances the way that we needed. I had to personally guarantee that first lease and take a big chance, which I was told not to do. And I think I just, like you figure it out. At the end of the day, I will never let this fail, and I'll just do whatever it takes to figure it out each step of the way. And I think by doing that, especially because it was a new sector, right? It's never been done, so there wasn't a rule book to follow. So in theory, you kind of have to keep failing and testing until you know exactly what works and what doesn't work.
Mhm. So, for listeners who may be unfamiliar, Remedy Place is a place to go with a membership or a la carte, I believe, where you can
Yeah.
have uh, cryotherapy, cold plunges, saunas, both infrared and traditional. You can have IV therapy and vitamin shots and hyperbaric chambers and compression therapy and all these therapies. And um, in a beautiful setting with really luxurious space with a people component, meaning I loved the bar in the LA, the West Hollywood place where you sit in a beautiful space, but there's no alcohol, there's kombucha on tap and you could do your work to Wi-Fi. And it's just a really cool space for, for wellness technologies mostly that are new. So this, as you say, had never been done. I mean, how did you find an architect? How did you know how much space to give to everything? I'm really interested in that thought process.
Yeah, once again, we worked. I didn't want to work with anyone in the spa space or the health and wellness space because I didn't want them to get like I don't want them to be inspired by health or wellness. So I found an amazing design firm called Bells and Whistles, and I told them like they didn't know anything about these wellness things. So it was a really cool collaboration to be able to bring in like my science and expertise with, really learning how to design with them. It was we had a really interesting back and forth because I was like, this has to be exact opposite of a clinic, so it cannot be white or colorful. And I'm like, it needs to be very dark and black. And I remember getting so much pushback because they're like, black and wellness. And I was like, yeah, like this is, I think of it as like a private members club. Like I want this to be like, feel like it's inspired by your favorite, restaurant or lounge. And that's what really drew the focus there because I'm trying to change the narrative of how people socialize. Um, you know, if it looks like a place where they would normally go to socialize, it's not that much of a juxtaposition. So that's why having the bar there, when people see that, it's like, oh wow, this looks like a place where I would normally go. Then we took out the alcohol. And I think it's important to note too, as it's really evolved, is we're not a gym, we're not a spa, and it's not only the bar and lounge that's social, but every single experience can be booked for more than a party of one, a party of two. And in New York, we have up suites up to a party of six. And that's what people are doing for a date night, what they're doing after work instead of a happy hour, where they're hosting their birthday or bachelor, bachelorette party to everything from a large scale event. I mean, we're doing events like companies like Saint Laurent to Nike are renting out our clubs to be an experiential venue for them to host their events. So it's been really interesting. And when I used to say social self-care or social wellness clubs, people would kind of laugh, like, "John, that's the most LA thing in the world. That's not going to work anywhere." And now, like you mentioned earlier, globally, it's a major trend, which is really exciting.
So, how did you happen to be so prescient?
What was it?
How did you happen to be so prescient about this trend? I mean, that no one was doing it. You were so convinced.
I just, like I was saying, I saw firsthand of like the problems, whether it was when I was shadowing and volunteering to then being in school to then seeing patients. You do that and you listen for over a decade and you see so many common problems. It's really about just thinking outside of the box and trying to solve what you see. And I think that was a big value add that it wasn't something that I was reading about or something that I fell in love with. Um, it was like firsthand experiences that allowed me to create or have the insight to know what to fix.
Well, you did a beautiful job. The first location opened. It's lovely. It's in a great space in a great neighborhood. And then, as I said, a month later, 2 months later, COVID happens. So,
Yeah.
what did you do to manage through that situation?
Yeah, that was probably one of the scariest moments of my life because I we
Had a
didn't
lot
raise a
on the
lot of money.
line,
Yeah,
right?
it didn't raise a lot, and it wasn't the lease was also under my name. And I just bought a house at that time, and I did a gut renovation, so it was an interesting time in my life where everything was going so good, and then it had to stop.
And
And we're a social wellness club, and even though we could be open, I didn't really know what that meant. I needed it to be safe for the team and then guests. So when they said 2 weeks, I was like, "Oh no, we can't close for 2 weeks. What are you talking about?" And then obviously that evolved and eventually we figured it out. We let people trickle in like safe ways and then we built it back up and it ended up working. And I think it was a real big tragedy globally, but I think it also was the one positive or silver lining is it kind of did put the light switch on for the whole health and wellness industry on how important your health is. And I mean, we're just the sickest that we've ever been. We kind of needed to shift that awareness because no one's gonna make you healthy. Only you can make you healthy, and it's not something that you just do for a week or a month or a cleanse that you do for X amount of time. It's like, no, this is a life process, and it's not about just not being sick. It's about using your health as a tool to be happy and successful and creative and better relationships. I just find that the healthier you are, the better everything in life is. And if you don't get to feel good, you're missing out on a whole side of life that most people never even get to see.
no, it's 100% true about COVID, and we've said it many times, like it was sort of the silver lining lift in the wings of spa and wellness because consumers, as you say, said, "Oh, okay, I need to be healthy. I'm responsible for myself. What are things I can do?" And it was already, I think, coinciding with a shift in younger people to more healthy activities. They don't want to go to bars and
Yeah.
nightclubs. They're all out hiking and biking and doing healthy things. And this is something fun that you can do with your friends. And it doesn't have to be warm and summery. It can be any time of year, and at night. Did you find that more people were interested in coming in the evening or versus the day? What were your early findings?
Yeah, I mean, it's surprisingly, I think our first surprise was how many people actually came during the day because we were like, doesn't everyone work during the weekdays during these hours? But it was interesting to see how the trends and times of the year how that shifted. Um, but there's a reason why we're open 7 days a week and almost 12 hours a day each day. It's an interesting range and people have all different schedules and we kind of want to just meet them wherever they're at.
Mhm. And that's only been exacerbated since COVID. I mean, you're right. People did used to work, well, maybe not in traditional schedules, and now it's anyone's guess, when anyone is working and when they're not. And I'm sure people can work while they're at their social wellness club too, which is an advantage that you provide. So
Yeah.
you have these basic pillars of human connections, holistic treatment, and design. Where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, I think whenever you're building a business, you got to figure out what your core pillars are. And I think, one, seeing how sick everyone was and all these chronic conditions on a rise, we can have every medical intervention and advancements in surgery and pharmaceuticals, and those are saving lives. They're not making people healthy. And also, no one can make you healthy except you. That's why self-care very literally is taking care of yourself. And I think that is a very important pillar that we hope to continually lead and push awareness around. The social component was because the number one complaint that I heard from 5 years in my practice was, Dr. Leary, I feel incredible. All my issues are gone, but all these lifestyle changes that you made me implement are ruining my social life, and now I can't have any fun. So I was like, okay, I know the importance of human connection for our health, but also I don't want a healthy lifestyle to be isolating because it doesn't need to be. And I know that I need to fix that. And then, contrary to a hospital or clinic that is so white and sterile, and there's a thing called white coat syndrome where you have a negative physiological response from just walking in. Your heart rate goes up, your body tenses. If you're trying to feel better and your environment that you're going into is working against you, it's kind of counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's as I was treating patients in their homes, I started to see how much faster they were healing. And I'm like, this makes a lot of
Interesting.
sense. If they're in their comfort zone and their guard is down, they're gonna be a lot more receptive to care. So how do I make our suites feel like homes, And like I think then as I started to learn about design, I started to study design. I started to think about just like this psychology of marketing, like there's psychology of design, whether it's what applies to your psychology and physiology. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you start thinking about how you can manipulate the body just from being in certain environments or by, targeting certain senses. You can do a lot to put the body in a better state to do what it does best. And that when it's given that opportunity, it heals and performs.
Well, that was very observant of you because you did create spaces that feel very comfortable and home-like. And yeah, I'm sure it puts everyone at ease when they enter. So, at what point did you have ambitions to cross the country and have another location, which is not a great business model, right? On two opposite sides and time zones, and you don't really get any scale advantages that way. What drove that decision?
I grew up in Rhode Island. I love the East Coast. And I went to the East Coast a lot, especially New York for patients. So I was going to New York on a regular basis for patients. And what's interesting is we almost signed the lease in March in 2020, right before the pandemic in New York. And thank God I didn't, because that would have been probably maybe the end of us. But we were ready to go. The first couple of months that we opened, we were busy, and I was like, we need to take this and run. And I was probably a little naive at that time, thinking that, you open one, a couple months later, you start looking for number two. And I think, everything happens for a reason. And I think I was slowed down by the pandemic to make sure I had a stronger foundation. And I just kind of trust the process. You really shouldn't question things. I think like I'm happy that I didn't sign that lease. I'm happy that the bank didn't give me that loan right out of school because it would have failed. And I start to think back and I'm like, there's reasons why all those things either didn't work out or was the wrong timing. And I think the goal is to be present and intuitive and kind of feel and trust and just do whatever you have control over. And then I feel like if you're a good person, you work really hard and you just focus on what you control, then life kind of figures it out for you.
Well, when did Flatiron open in New York?
September 2022.
2022. And opening a business in California is a daunting procedure, but New York City has its own issues, especially around construction and renovation. I mean, how did you find that process? Was it really nerve-wracking?
I think I have so much to do every day that I don't really think about. I'm never stressed or I wouldn't even say nervous. I just my expectation that it's going to be really hard. It's going to be difficult. There's probably going to be fires a couple times a week. And I think whenever you're thinking about construction, if you ever just think it's going to be perfect and easy, then your
You're
expectations aren't
wrong.
going to be met. And yeah, and I think if you just expect it to be absolutely terrible, and then you get some wins, it's like, wow, this is a this is a win. So I think anyone that has done anything in construction, to level set expectations, they know that no such thing as smooth construction. So I think as long as you know that and you embrace it and just do whatever you can control, yeah, I think that's it. Because also it's not that at that time I was only working on building the next one. I was also running the existing one and having to raise money and uh, you know be a leader in the team. So there's so many things where even if there's a fire, it's like get to go into the next meeting or be on a podcast or jump on
Right.
TV or get an interview. And I think that's what makes entrepreneurs so strong because you have to be so adaptive and you have to be resilient to stress. And you need to learn how to hold your composure and, you know, trial and error. I think school can't teach. School could have never taught me what to expect while building Remedy. I think there's a lot that I could have learned that would have made it easier, but still, there's not like a simple rule book to follow. And if there is, then
No,
you're definitely not innovating something.
no, and doctors don't get a lot of business training either in the medical
Zero.
school, do they?
Yeah, I think I had one class, and I'm like that, probably could have been improved. Actually, fun story is my one business class in my doctorate, I presented. You had to build your business plan for your practice, and I presented Remedy, and they said, "Oh, that won't work." And then, which is funny, I think in hindsight, I think I'm happy they said that because I was like, I'll figure it out. But if I was ever a professor, I probably wouldn't tell people their concept wouldn't work. I think you want to inspire and motivate people, not kind of tell them when to work. So
Do
it's
it.
it's interesting.
No, and you're right. I mean, because to your point earlier, if you're not thinking outside the box, you're just going to make the same thing as everyone else. And we don't need more of the same, we need different. So good for you.
Uh,
How long did the New York build out take? Like, do you recall how many months or years that took to bring to fruition?
of well, the first one was at rocket speed. I mean, I think we officially signed the lease in January and opened in September.
That is
Um,
rocket speed.
yeah, which we would never be able to accomplish again.
And now you have the second one which is in Soho.
That one took longer than expected, but for things out of our control. And then Boston, Boston happened pretty fast. Nowhere near as fast as number two, but it's a very big project and there's a lot of details, and I think we did a phenomenal job with the execution of this one.
Has it opened yet, Boston?
No, soon.
Soon. What is the difference in scale in like square feet from West Hollywood to Flatiron to Soho? Are they similarly sized?
No, West Hollywood's 4,500 square feet, so tinier. And then we did 7,200, and then we did 7,600. Now we're doing over 10,000.
Oh. And your Flatiron location in New York is on two levels. That must have been a very complex building with all the water features.
Yeah, same. Soho has two floors as well.
Mm. And
No,
Boston, now
Boston's
all.
all one floor.
Oh, isn't it funny how much easier one floor makes things? It's like the
Everything.
stairs. What is the deal with the stairs?
Yeah,
But
waste,
we
waste,
can
wasted
introduce
space.
that. Yeah, it's so
You know,
complicated.
New York, New York's a tough city to get a lot of space. So sometimes you have to do two floors.
So, what have you learned along the way? I'm interested in hearing what services have really taken off. What has taken more time? I mean, have you changed the offering at all along the way?
Yeah, I think the thing that blew up for us was we were the first place to turn ice baths into a class format. We created the world's first breathwork ice bath class where every 30 minutes a new class starts and you have your breathwork outside of the tub and then you're coached through up to 6 minutes in the ice bath. I was doing that on retreats and it almost didn't actually make it into Remedy, and thank God it did because it blew up and we got hundreds of millions of views online on in the beginning when we were doing those, and then we put so many huge names in the industry in their first ice baths, and then they would talk about it, and then that just created a gigantic shift where everyone knew us as this ice bath company, and we started doing ice bath events from like Cannes Film Festival to the Kardashians' backyard, and now there's ice bath events or ice baths at every single event everywhere. And we were the first ones to do that. So it's interesting just to see how, like we can shift awareness, do something cool, and then for this whole movement to be created from that. And, ice baths. I love so much because I think I know how impactful they are. And that's why we just released an ice bath with Kohler,
Hmm.
which we're very excited about.
Yes, I have my Kohler hat here, my Kohler Remedy Place hat that I've been wearing. It's very nice, warm inside.
I
Um,
love it.
I love that. So, besides the cold plunges, what else has done well in terms of the service offering?
Yeah, I mean, all of our technologies are doing amazing, and so are our alternative medicine doctors. People love our chiropractic, they love our acupuncture and cupping, they love our IVs, they love our functional medicine. I just think, I think alternative medicine just never had the proper platform or the awareness, or people weren't describing it in the right way to be understood. And I think alternative medicine has commonly been misunderstood because it's not traditional. And I think when things that aren't understood, they might think it's not ordinary, and they might not think it works. But seeing it firsthand, alternative medicine does work, and there is a lot of science behind it, and it's extremely powerful. And I think that's another big part of something I really appreciate about Remedy, because I just think that between like functional medicine and all these alternative medicine doctors, like that should be the first line of intervention before surgery and drugs.
Mhm.
Um, and we're not there yet, but when you actually think about how big that opportunity is and how much time and money you can save people by doing it naturally, if they're willing to put in the work, that's where we start creating like major shifts.
Mhm. I was really happy to hear on the Global Wellness Institute initiative call earlier this week, Susie Ellis said that cryotherapy will be the next modality added to wellnessevidence.com because we haven't had it there. And that's a
Ah,
great place for people to go and look at the data on how this helps you. I mean, we know anecdotally, and you see celebrities doing it, as you said, but some people want to see the proof, if you will, that it's efficacious.
yeah, I think. And now what I tell them is go get a wearable, do the service, and see how it affects you. You don't need to wait for a research article to come out, because now your wearables will tell you the impact that it makes. And I think that's also what I'm really excited about, because, research, depending on who's funding it, could be biased. And there's also like reason why people research things. And I just think I don't need a research article to tell me what an ice bath's going to do to my biometrics, because I know, and that how it affects me might be different for you. And I
Right.
think health is so individualized that now with wearables, research is great, and I think it needs to keep getting invested in research, but also for people that are skeptical, they can honestly do that themselves now and see firsthand, which is powerful.
I agree. It's so true what you say about the wearables because we're all walking around. I've got my one here, and you look at it and you have all this data. What are we doing with the data? I mean, your physician doesn't look at it, your massage therapist doesn't look at it, but we look at it. But I feel like we should have a better plan for what to do with all that data we're collecting. And to that, I'm going to ask you about your personal self because I know you lead a very healthy lifestyle and you have practiced all of this yourself. I mean, what does having a nice bath do to your biometrics?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Being submerged in an ice bath for 6 minutes, I don't think there's anything that will shift you more mentally, physically, or emotionally in 6 minutes naturally than an ice bath.
Hmm.
For me, the nights that I do an ice bath from a biometric standpoint, I'm in a much deeper sleep, deep and REM sleep. And that is so impactful because we know how important sleep is. So anything that can drastically improve your sleep score is going to change everything for you. And I think it's also teaching your body how to be more resilient and teaching it how to use an extreme or how to use an external stressor to be able to learn how to adapt to be more resilient. And I think right now, a lot of people are even, I remember seeing the Time magazine front page that stress is the number one killer. And I want to be like, over stress is the number one killer, but moderate stress is actually good for your health, and it's good for your research has proven moderate stress is great for your performance and your memory. We need a little stress Because if without that resistance, we can't get stronger. And if you think of it as like we go to the gym and use resistance to tear our muscles to then repair to then be stronger. If
Mhm.
you start taking that philosophy with every aspect of your health, and how do you challenge all of these systems to make them more resilient and stronger, you become more resilient and stronger.
Well, makes sense. I mean, some things are hard, but there's a reason they're hard, because they're good for you. And I don't
Yeah,
think sitting in an ice bath is very appealing, but you can't deny the effect it has on you. When did
yeah.
you take your first ice bath? Do you remember?
Oh my God. I think I took one in high school. And then, yeah, sporadically through, a handful of times through college. But then in school, you start learning about modalities, and then, it's always been really big in sports medicine. So there's a natural thing to gravitate to, and I would recommend it for my patients. But I didn't start doing them in class format until I started hosting retreats.
Hmm.
And the retreats is when I was like, oh, I can't just put everyone in one ice bath. And I started lining them up. And then I would add the breath work component because I knew that would help the performance in there. And my retreats were always small, like 15 to 20 people max. But then we did one in Costa Rica before Remedy opened. That was 60 people. And
Mm.
seeing 60 people rotate through a breathwork ice bath class, we were doing 10 at a time. I was like, wow, this is so much more powerful. And that's where I was like, okay, I need to go back and change Remedy because in West Hollywood we didn't have it. And we were in the middle
Mm.
of construction and we changed it last minute.
Good for you for observing that. What happens to the heart in the ice bath? Does it slow down or does it speed up to keep you warmer? What's the natural
So
response?
the first response is you go into a sympathetic state. So your body, it's hard to breathe, your heart rate goes up. But then you shift into a parasympathetic state as you get your breath under control. So for me, I always, with my wearables, track and watch like how low can I get my heart rate as I continually push through the ice bath. It's also a good way to really know like when it's too much, right? So once my heart rate would start climbing back up, that would be a good sign of, all right, once I got it down, if it starts going up, that maybe that's too much for me. Um, but that's another cool practice that people can do.
So you get in the bath, you watch it, it drops, and when it starts to go
Go,
back up,
goes up, goes up first, and then with
um,
breathing it goes down.
it's down.
And then you get it to something where it's manageable. And then if it starts to go up again, that's usually a sign of your body, like that's your mark that day.
Okay, it's time to get out. I mean, 6 minutes is long, but I guess you build up to that.
No, honestly, I think people's bodies are a lot more resilient than they think. In the first 3 minutes of ice bath, your body's in that shock phase where it's like, get me out of here.
Mm.
So if you don't get past that phase to know that it does get easier, I think you're almost missing out. And I think it's
Mm.
important for your body to reach that adaptation phase in the water because if you don't push it to that point and you just get out, you're missing the whole climbing response of like how much more that you can go. And more
Mm.
isn't always better. If like I have people that do 6 minutes every single time they do it, and then one day they'll be shivering at 4 minutes one day, and I'm like, oh, you have to get out. And they're like, no, 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 I do 6 minutes all the time. And I say, well, did you have a stressful week? Did you not sleep last night? Did you drink last night? And
Mhm.
just like if you were a runner and your time was not as good because you didn't sleep or you drank, your performance in an ice bath can be affected by being overly stressed already too.
So you're a runner also, I believe, yes?
Yeah, I was never a runner until I moved to New York, and running on the West Side Highway or Central Park is so beautiful. It's so social. And I just kind of fell in love with it. So that's a big, not right now in the winter when it's cold
No,
and
not so
snowing,
great now.
and I don't want to run on a treadmill. I do occasionally, but I'm like, I feel like a hamster. So I'm ready for the warm weather to come back and to get
That
back
makes two
outside.
of us. So you've been a bit of a guinea pig with yourself for the modalities you practice. I mean, you lead a very healthy lifestyle. I don't think
Yeah.
you're to the extreme of Brian Johnson, right? But you're practicing what you preach.
Yeah, I think what Brian's doing for science is great. I think his approach is different than my approach. If I was to go 100% into it, but I think he reached a point in his life where he already had his family. He sold his company, so he can invest 100% of his time and energy into it. For me, I look at it differently. I'm in the beginning of building a business and something that I hope to be a legacy. And my work is a major part of my life that I won't or don't ever plan on giving up. So I don't only use my health as a tool to make sure I feel good, but it's also to make sure that I can be successful in my mission with Remedy.
Mhm.
I think in order for me to also like get people on board, it'd be weird if I didn't practice what I preach or lead by example. And everything's in Remedy because I know it works because I've done it firsthand and I've used it on patients. And I just think that there's this whole correlation missing that I think the next wave that you're really going to see is right now all you do is hear about prevention. It's like prevention,
Mhm.
prevention. And I'm like, we've gotten so sick that the goal of health is to be not sick.
Not sick,
Versus,
right?
I'm like, do you realize how bad it is when there's this whole other side missing? And I just know that the healthier that I am and the more that I take care of myself, the easier it is to be more resilient with all the things that happen in life and to be able to build remedy.
Mhm. Well, tell us a little bit about the vision that you see going forward. You're about to open your fourth location. You have
Yeah.
some partnerships or collaborations with big corporations like Kohler that we mentioned. How did that come about?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me is like the big vision is I think self-care and this whole social wellness movement will be the biggest vertical of this, soon to be $8 or $9 trillion industry.
Mhm.
Um, And I think that Remedy Place can lead that. And I want Remedy Place to help impact more people than any company in the health and wellness industry. And not only with us, like as a company, but also everyone else that we can help inspire or motivate to create their own thing. And I think this movement is already happening. And it's exciting because it's happening so much faster than I thought. And, we do have the component of the brick and mortar clubs, and there'll be advancements and changes and really cool things that we'll do in that space. But I think there's also a lot more that we'll be using because it's not just that our company is these clubs, but it's also a brand. And this brand allows us to use that with our expertise and our data to be an amazing partner to big companies, like Kohler, for example. Um, there's not much more that I can share at this moment, but there's a lot of verticals to the business that have been yet to be announced. And, we just want to help reach as many people as possible and really change the narrative of people socialize.
I noticed on the website that you have something called the framework, which looks like it's going to be an effort at a digital option. Like, could you explain what that is?
Yeah. So for us, I always try to figure out a way to give back. The clubs are always going to be this luxury experience. When luxury experience comes with a price tag, but like I said, if we're trying to reach the masses and make global impact, I also want to make sure we have a way to give back. And I think the only way to change our current healthcare problem is through education. You don't need to come to Remedy to be healthy. You just need to be told, no matter what you have access to or what you're willing to do, what you can do today and tomorrow
Mhm.
and in your life to take care of yourself. And I always say that your body and your mind are your number one assets, but you don't even know how it works, never mind how to take care of it. So the job with our brand as we continually build trust and build our name that we are this reliable source that we can educate for free and take things that we continually learn. Like I said, we've been doing this for over a decade now. Like we do have so much to share and so much to teach. And it's not things to teach based on what we're reading, it's what we're experiencing firsthand. And I think that adds a lot of value. So I think that is like the biggest mission of Remedy is to be a free educational platform. That way
Mm,
we can reach everybody.
good for you. How many remedies do you envision there being in the world?
Um, in in the style that we have now, probably 15 to 20.
Mhm. Any international, or you think it will be in the US?
No, no, I definitely want it to be a global brand.
Okay, that's good to hear. So, Jonathan, can I ask you a few things about the clubs themselves, which I think would be of interest to our professional listeners? Like, I think that your ratio of labor to revenue is very different than a traditional spa. Am I
Yeah,
wrong in that, or?
correct. Yes,
Uh-huh. But your build out is very expensive.
correct.
So your model is you need a lot of money up front and then you have less operating costs.
Yeah, and it to date, yes.
Hmm. How long did it take you, or do you think it will take you if you haven't yet, to reach profitability like on West Hollywood? Like did that happen yet, or did it happen quickly?
Yeah, I don't know if what we've talked about publicly, um, but each club does really well. I think that
Okay.
that's what I can probably say.
So I'm thinking of people who, not that anyone can open a remedy, but there's many people out there that want to open some sort of social thermal experience. And, it's always daunting to think about the expense going in and how long it will take for the ROI to make sense. When you do your business plans, do you have a 3, 5, like what's the window you think until you can break even, say, on the investment?
Yeah, I think it just depends. It's pretty easy calculations when you're building out your financial model. But it depends on how much they're putting into their build out and how much they think it's going to cost them to run. And for us, each club is different. We have a different amount of experience in each club. We have a different amount of square footage of each club. Um, so it's interesting to see for us, is it paying off or not to be bigger and spend more to get our money back faster?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that's where and that might be different for everybody. But at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, I hope people see Remedy and they do want to create their own because just like I think in the past, when gyms first existed, right? Um, one gym would open up a town and everyone's like, oh, you can't have another gym. And now there's a gym on every corner.
Mm-hmm.
I see the same for this industry. I think if everyone in the world needs this, so how are you going to target whatever demographic of people that you want to reach and help? I really do think that everyone needs this, and that's how big this opportunity is. And if you think it's like this industry is just starting, and I'm telling you that everyone needs this. So how are you targeting every type of individual that needs this? It's like, no, the more the merrier. And with more people doing it, it just helps drive awareness to the importance around these things.
I have to say I agree with that. I mean, it's hard to be the first at something, but then you've kind of primed the market and the consumers are like, oh, right, I get that. I understand what that is. And maybe this one's dressed up in different colors or it has some different message, but we know, I mean, people now know what a cold plunge is, which I don't think 2 years ago would have
Yeah.
happened. And I can remember going to one of the New York spas, not yours, a different one, and seeing all these young women in the cold plunge. And it was like, you never used to see that, right? The cold plunge, people didn't even know what it was. Um, and now they're all in it. And I thought, this is something, like, we're really making progress here. Do you yourself also use the opposite, the sauna features?
Yeah. I mean, I try to use as much as I can. At the end of the day, like even for me, I try to replace being in New York City. I'm like, if I can change 2 or 3 nights a week to then go use our contrast suite and do hot and cold with friends, that's my main goal. If I could be in a sauna every night, I would, but I'm also traveling. But I also stay at hotels, depending, like I'll stay at hotels based on what amenities they have. So
Mm-hmm.
if I can continue, but it's a balance, right? I do work a lot, and I always make time for self-care, but it doesn't mean that I get to do it all day, and all night, which I wish I could sometimes.
Yes, we don't think you're just laying around in your saunas. But you would say 2, 3 times a week you do a full contrast suite.
Yeah, and also too, like I do work in the saunas. Like I take meetings in our contrast suite. I take obviously maybe not a first meeting, but depending on who the individual is and like the level of relationship I have, it's interesting that I have been able to replace a lot of my meetings, whether with a morning run or morning workout class or in the contrast suite. And that way I can try to get work and, some social time in too, and my health.
You are a champion multitasker. I can see that.
Have to be.
Is there anything that you wish you had put in Remedy that you didn't or that clients are asking for? Do you see anything on the horizon for the next iterations of Remedy?
I think people want us to have a restaurant. Um, but I'm not a restaurateur, and restaurants are very tough businesses.
Mhm.
So uh, I'd rather not at a restaurant, but I never know if a partner comes in and helps
Mhm.
give food to our clubs. Outside of that, no, I think it's important. There's always new stuff that comes out, but I like to know that it works. And I like to spend a lot of time because I want people to know when they go to Remedy that it's not just something that's new and flashy, but it's something that we know is going to make a positive impact on them. And that's important. So there's innovations within each club that you'll see, and each one has something slightly new or different. That's not always because it's better, but it's also just to provide variety, or to give alternative options. Like say we have two clubs in New York City, so there's some changes that allow you to, you if you live in New York City, you can go to both clubs.
Mhm. Can you, with a membership, go to either club?
Yeah. Well, the good thing is you don't have to be a member to come to Remedy. And then for your membership, depending on what tier you have, you can have multi-club or single club.
Mhm. Yes, Planet Fitness knew what they were doing in that regard. So that's a
Yeah,
good strategy to follow. So eventually there will be a global Remedy Place membership that people will be able to get.
for sure.
Be too long in the future. Well, thanks again, Dr. Jonathan Leary, for joining us and telling the story of Remedy Place. Fascinating and good for you for being so visionary.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure.